Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Lion update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. I'm Tom Hannafin. He is Nittany Lion legend Deon Butler, sitting in for Justin King for the remainder of the season. Tough outing in Columbus for the Penn State Nittany Lions, falling to the number one team in the country by a score of 38-14. Deon, it was at least encouraging in the first half. You go into halftime, 17-14 deficit. The first touchdown of the season scored in the first half on the Ohio State Buckeyes came thanks to Penn State. 2 touchdowns in the first half. Looked like things were rolling. Looked like Penn State could potentially put up a fight. And that just was unfortunately not the case in the second half. Things got out of hand, and there's a reason Ohio State's the number one team in the country. The spread entering this game was in the favor of Ohio State, I believe, by a margin of 19.5, according to FanDuel at the time of kickoff. So first look at this game, what were your feelings overall, Deon?
I mean, like you said, encouraging first half, right? So it's just one of those things, literally what we talked about as far as, hey, kind of keep the score low, keep it ugly. We were running the ball, even when it was 10-0. They had a lot of time of possession, but it didn't seem like they were doing explosive plays, right? We were, for the most part, pretty much trying to keep the top on that defense, right? But that's one of those things, like I said, in the second half, they made some adjustments. But first half was definitely encouraging. Second half kind of got more to what you wanted to stay away from, high scoring. They started getting more chunk plays, and their defense really woke up.
It was something you had brought up, and we talked about it on our preview episode with Chimdi Chekwa and Brian Browning of Believe in Buckeyes, that Penn State was going to need turnovers to stay in this game, was going to need some stuff to happen on special teams. You got that turnover, that fumble that kind of surprised a lot of people there in the final 2 minutes of the first half. Chaz Coleman picks it up, and Penn State's able to capitalize. It looked like the outside run scheme from Penn State, outside of the tackles, Katron Allen, even Nick Singleton as well, was very effective. But the passing strategy that I know you were in favor of, the quick passing game, being a little bit more creative, was the call from Terry Smith to Andy Kotelnicki, trying to get the ball downfield. There were about 1 billion wide receiver screens on first down that were at the line of scrimmage or behind it. And it just didn't seem like there was a change in what Andy Kotelnicki's been doing for a while here. So what were some of the good and bad you saw from the offense?
So, right, the good part about that, right, the running game in the beginning, right, looked really good. Definitely got Singleton involved, which is great, right? He's one of our better weapons. We need to figure out ways to get him involved. I do think, right, what I mentioned about getting the ball out of his hands quick, letting him, the quarterback, feel like, all right, let's get a little groove going, right? But also, when I say quick game, I'm talking like hitches, curls, flat combos, slants, things like that. And we hit an out route later in the game to Hudson. Those things should be kind of just you do routinely, right? If they're against off coverage, those things. So when I say get the ball out of his hands quick, it's still got to get some depth because, like you said, when you're doing screens sideways like that, everything seems to come downhill. And I say downhill being Ohio State, right? Those guys are just now flying downhill. They're not scared. They're not backing up. And, it's a continuous theme that I'm going to continue to say. It's going to be hard to beat really good teams without chunk plays. It's very hard, even for someone like Drew Aller, if he was playing, to just sustain 10-play, 12-play drives against good defenses. You need those, hey, this was just a 4-play drive. We had a 50-yard bomb in there. And even if that leads to just flipping the field. So we continue to, we're struggling at that. We don't produce chunk plays, and that's going to continue to be something that we have to fix. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard for us offensively.
Got a few chunk plays here and there out of the running game, but to your point, none in the passing game. If you want to credit the running back screen that they engineered to Nick Singleton, which was very well designed and well timed call by Andy Kotelnicki, but just few and far between. And ironically, the downfield passing game didn't show up until the fourth quarter, until the game was well out of hand. You really didn't see much of it. You got to see Kobe Howard catch, I think, his second pass of the season. You didn't see Tyser Denmark get involved in the passing game. What did you think of the Liam Clifford gadgets?
I think those are timing plays, right? And I think the announcers kind of touched on it where it just seems like the timing, for whatever reason, didn't work out, right? It was just we had some drive, we had some momentum going, and then, there's a reason also, again, they're a top defense, they're sound. That was one of the things I talked about as far as our defense trying to get back to being sound, playing fundamental football, right? So when you throw trick plays at them, you've really got to set them up. And it just didn't seem that they were set up for it. They didn't fall for it. They were sound. They stayed back. And then that gets you off schedule, right? And we know we're not right now, at least an offense that's built to play behind the sticks. Especially with a young quarterback, but, to his credit, I don't think he played bad today at all. I think
No,
he,
I agree.
had some great throws, but you also want to put him in a position to succeed. So those are the things, right? When you do those trick plays, the tough part is if you don't have it set up correctly and the defense doesn't bite, you're behind the sticks, and we're just not that type of offense right now.
I completely agree with what you said about Ethan Grunkemeyer, because this wasn't necessarily a bad performance by a redshirt freshman in his second start as a college quarterback, and 2 starts now on the road in hostile environments against top 10 defenses. Like, he looked like a redshirt freshman. He looked like a redshirt freshman that, yes, did he miss some reads here and there? Certainly. The interception there late in the game, a lot of credit to Caleb Downs and the way that he played that. Yes, that was an underthrown ball by Grunkemeyer, but he's on his back foot, pressure in his face. Not a great decision, but a lot of factors going into something like that. Not to completely apologize for an interception, but when he finishes the day 19 of 28 for 145 yards and you protected the football up until the game was completely out of hand, you can't pin this on, Ethan Grunkemeyer being bad at his job or something like that. I thought he did a good job for the most part in this game. For those of you watching right now live on YouTube, get in our comments section. If you have questions, if you have comments after this game, let Deon and I know. We'll get your questions and comments up here in a moment. And of course, if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month. You can get all past and upcoming episodes of State of State ad-free, commercial-free. Just follow the link in the description of this podcast. And of course, we're going to get this episode out everywhere after we are done here live on YouTube. I want to go here to the comments section. Maddie, my expectations were low today, so this game didn't surprise me, but I'm sorry. I've never liked the Andy Kotelnicki offense. You and I talked about it coming into this. Yeah, the expectations were low. The spread, early in the week was 20.5, according to FanDuel, came down just a little bit, but nobody was giving Penn State a chance. By the end of the first half, people were thinking, okay, Penn State might be in this thing. And then the number 1 team in the country played exactly like the number 1 team in the country in the second half. On the subject, what's been your opinion, Deon, of the Andy Kotelnicki offense for not just this season, but his whole time at Penn State?
Yeah, I want to touch on one thing before I get into that. Even the interception with Grunkemeyer near the end, right? Coming from a wideout standpoint, spacing. The spacing was awful on that. That's when, especially when you're down in the red zone, right? It looks some type of hitch corner combo, right? And that's one of those where that hitch has to sit down, and you really got to make, in that situation, it was Downs. You've really got to make him make a decision. Either he's gonna bite up on the hitch or he's going to slouch off. And since the spacing is off, he was right in between both. Yeah. And, those are some of those little subtle things, right? When I talk about playing sound football, you have to have great spacing, and it gets magnified in that red zone. But turning back to the question you're talking about, the offense, right? It's just one of those things that doesn't seem like we're in a rhythm ever offensively, right? Things get chunk plays here and there, like a run or a couple good plays here and there, and something happens. But it doesn't just seem like we can methodically usually go down the field. And like I said, I'm going to continue to harp on, we can't just hit a hitch route, just a 10-yard out, and then some runs. And then we can't just hit, a dig route or something. It just seems really choppy. And I think that's what probably they're alluding to there. We're just not like an offense, because you don't just get into a rhythm. And it's just really hard when you're not offensively in a rhythm to like really make plays and to kind of continue success and then keep the defense off the field, right? And kind of what you alluded to earlier with the trick play. It seems like a couple plays and a trick play, and then we're off schedule. And then now it's no rhythm there. So, I'm always going to be, I bleed blue and white. So, I want the guys to do well. And it's just kind of trying to figure that out. I don't know, but it seems we definitely have to figure that out as far as getting into a rhythm offensively.
I want to give credit. Katron Allen worked his butt off today. 21 carries, 76 yards, a touchdown. The long at 26 to open the game, which inspired some people. And he averaged about 3.6 yards per carry. Nick Singleton, 3 catches for 28 yards, 6 carries for 18 yards, and a rushing touchdown. He's second in school history in rushing touchdowns. I thought Nick played hard considering the limited touches in this game. Devontae Ross certainly got involved, 5 catches for 26 yards, just like not a lot of production in the passing game, and a myriad of reasons why this Ohio State defense is very good. There's a reason it's the number 1 rated defense in the country statistically, all those other elements. Question here from Melinda, is Grunk improving? From game 1 to game 2, it's such a small sample size, but to my eyes, I think the quick answer is yes. But like, I don't envy any young quarterback, Deon, starting at Iowa at night, and then you get a bye week to kind of collect yourself on the heels of James Franklin getting fired, Drew Aller going down, and then you're on the road. Aller was at least on the sideline today, which was great to see. But man, like, it seems like Grunk is improving, but it seems like it's too early to tell.
Yeah, I think it's very small sample size, but the things that you do look for, right? He's not today, right, in that atmosphere, minus the turnover there at the end, but he's not, just giving the ball away. He's making seems like smart decisions. Yes, he's gonna miss some, but he's not losing the game. And that's what you want in your young quarterback, right? Don't lose the game. I'm not gonna per se ask you to go win a game. That'd be great if you did, but don't lose it. And then especially on the road in this environment. So it'll be and I think that'll be one of the big things, right? We continue to look at Penn State is the development of the younger guys coming in. And I do want to give a shout out to Drew, like you said, for being on the sideline, right? A lot of guys in today's world check out. They've got, money, and they just kind of, I'm going to go rehab somewhere else. And so that was really good to see him taking that on. So I hope, guys and scouts take a look at that and see hopefully the type of leader that he is. But, you just want the young guy to be able to progressively get better. It's a very hard gauntlet that he's stepping into, but just don't lose games. Don't be a turnover machine, and kind of build on that. And now I think the next step for him, hopefully, is to start getting some rhythm throws.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today.
Your point about Drew Aller, I think he had a Rolex on the sideline.
They're different today, man. They are different today.
It's a different life. It's a very different life than when you were playing once upon a time. Maddie with a comment here. Penn State needs to go back to having a workhorse running back. In my opinion, guys can't get into a flow when you're coming in and out all day. I'll say this. No one said that the last 3 years. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen were splitting carries. Nobody had a problem with it. Katron has been a workhorse running back for the last handful of games. I disagree with this. I think this is a modern era of college football. The national champions last year, the team you just played, the Ohio State Buckeyes, had a two-headed monster in Judkins and Henderson. So it can be done either way. To me, Deon, and we're going to get your opinion, it looked like Penn State was outmatched in the trenches, both sides of the ball. And it wasn't necessarily a huge margin. I want to say Penn State's offensive line had more success against that Ohio State defensive line rushing the football than I expected. But it was more the inverse, where Ohio State's offensive line thoroughly controlled Penn State's defensive line. What did you see?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think definitely their offensive line controlled the line of scrimmage. They were able to get some runs, right, which is one of their points of contention for offenses, them being able to run the ball. They were able to do that. And then obviously, right, once again, I'm always harp on it, but when you're able to get some chunk plays in, back some people up and kind of take that pressure off, like it'll get you into a rhythm. And obviously, I mean, at one point, right, I saw the stat he had 3 touchdowns, 3 incompletions, right? Talk about rhythm, right? He was comfortable. He was in a rhythm. And that speaks to, right, controlling that line of scrimmage. He's not getting hurried back there and things like that. And then, yeah, on the other end, I think we handled the line pretty well, like being able to run the ball and be able to get, some good 4-yard, 5-yard, and some even bigger plays like that. But then once again, you've got to mix in where you've got to be able to back them up. And, like you alluded to earlier, again, those sideways screens, if they're not, those are almost like runs And, you've got to be able to mix in something else to get them to back up, because it's just going to be thoroughly hard, once again, to control the line of scrimmage all game without chunk plays against really good teams.
It was predictable offensively. It was often on first down, it was a run or a wide receiver screen. And you would often see there was a point where there were wide receiver screens back to back. And then you went into a gimmick wildcat play with Liam Clifford that went nowhere. Like Ohio State, no one in the state of Ohio was worried about Liam Clifford today. And then you try some other gadget play or whatever, and it would just get, to your point earlier, would get Penn State off schedule, and it would put you in a deeper hole, and then it would create these third and long situations where that's a damn good defensive line. Kenyatta Jackson is a freak. He's probably going to be a first-round draft pick at some point, the defensive end, number 97 for Ohio State. There wasn't a lot of time for Grunkemeyer to throw, and that's ironic because they were only blitzing maybe 3 or 4 guys sometimes, and they were creating coverage sacks. I think we've talked a lot about the offense. The defense for Penn State, what you saw in the first half was encouraging, but ultimately, I don't know how many secondaries in the country can answer those wide receivers, because it was just a go route over top of the coverage. And how many times did they hit that? 3 or 4 times to Tate and Jeremiah Smith. It was incredible. I don't know how you keep up with that offense. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they did a really solid job, right? To your point, I mean, that's an offense that's going to score points. That's an offense that you want to limit and keep off the field is part of how you limit them, right? Which is, going back to our offense, trying to sustain some drives. But when you continuously put that defense out there, right? I think they gave some different looks today. They did enough to hang into the game, right? But it's just one of those things, to beat them, you're going to have to score. If I had to nitpick, it would be, we still, I feel like at times there was a critical play and there was like a third down, and we had him pretty much for a sack where we had some momentum. And he, to his credit, he made a play. He scrambled around the quarterback saying, but that's also one of those things you've got to make those plays, right? Those are the critical ones, because that's when we had momentum. We stopped them again, and then maybe we get the ball. Well, we'll get the ball back because they would have punted. And then, who knows what happens, but then you start to really put that pressure on them. But I think he converted that, and that led to a touchdown. And that's one of those things where it's a small play, but it's a very critical play. And those are the plays you have to make in those big time games, especially from your big time players, right? Our D line has been, much appreciated, much talked about. It's like those are those plays where it's like, I wish we had those.
There was not a ton in the running game for Ohio State. At least Penn State was able to limit them in the second quarter, to the point that Ohio State was like, great, we'll just throw the ball. Like, they really didn't seem too concerned about being balanced in this game, because they knew they were just having so much success through the air. And they had their success running the football late in the second half when they were just salting away the game. Sayin finishes 20 of 23, 316 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. The one tip pass that's somehow one hand wrangled by Jeremiah Smith, he's a freak. And we talked about it last year, Deon, is that had he been eligible, he could have gone in the NFL draft and he probably would have been a top 10 pick. Like, that's the best player in the country. That's the Heisman Trophy winner. I don't know who will win it, but that's the best player in the country. So I can't sit here and pick apart Penn State's defense. It's like, well, how did you struggle against him, Tate, Ennis, Claire, all these other weapons? It's too much to contain. And we've talked about the injuries that Penn State has had. Tony Rojas being one that's been critical there at linebacker, the lack of depth of the defensive line. There's just a lot of things to point towards here in terms of why Penn State is struggling. Melinda, this question, and again, like, we've heard through the season, whether it was James Franklin or Terry Smith, an effort to try and simplify the defense so that the players can operate faster. And Melinda's question here, is the defense learning Jim Knowles' defense at all? It's extremely difficult for anybody on the outside looking in to answer that question. At least you saw some improvement in the first half there, but just athlete to athlete, Deon, it looked like Ohio State had better guys than Penn State, and that's why they won the game.
Yeah, I would, and yeah, to absolutely what you say. I mean, it's a great question, but it would be crazy for us who don't have a playbook and aren't at practice to be able to know, because we don't know the nuances, we don't know the checks and things like that. So it's a tough question to answer from the outside. But to your point, today didn't crazily look like people were out of place.
Yeah.
To your point, it looked like just people made plays, right? If a guy was running, he had somebody trailing him. Well, that's the guy that's covering him. He just happens to get beat, right? But it wasn't like a blown coverage. Even, you got the couple of the post routes. Like one of them, he was doubled. Safety's kind of flat-footed. I don't know why you're flat-footed with Jeremiah Smith running at you, but he's doubled. That's not a play call. That's not a scheme. That's a, hey man, we're already doubling him. He's just got to make a play, and that guy made a play. So I don't know the answer to that, but I do not think they were out of place. I just think, to your point, they just you've got to start winning those one-on-one battles. And those are the small things when you're in the film room that you see that, maybe outsiders don't see, of like, hey, we had this schemed up pretty good, or maybe the offense had it schemed up good for Ohio State, but we beat that block there. So now that made that null and void. And now it looked like a great play on us, but that was a great play call by them. They just lost an individual battle somewhere.
Bob in the comments section saw what you saw, Deon, DBs and linebackers standing flat-footed. Not ideal. Taking a look at the drive chart for Ohio State, this was also not ideal. Touchdown, field goal, touchdown, the fumble, end of the half, touchdown, touchdown. Ohio State didn't punt until 12 minutes and 23 seconds remaining in the fourth quarter. Then they got a touchdown, and then mercifully the game ended. I mean,
rhythm. They're in rhythm, right? And that's what rhythm looks like on a stat sheet, right? Like, hey, they're consistently moving the ball. Whether they're getting a field goal range or touchdowns, like they're in rhythm, they're feeling it, and that's literally what we talked about as well in the pregame show, is like trying to make them really drive down the field, force an error somewhere, but don't let them just continue to be in a rhythm. And that's what they did. And they got that crowd behind them. And then, for a second there, we had the crowd kind of going iffy, right? And that's what we were like, hey, this is how we could pull this off. But then, that crowd, I think really them coming out of the half with a uppercut, like they came out the half, like no games, shot play, and boom, like that was like, all right, here they are.
Yeah. It woke him back up. I felt bad because Terry Smith, you could see there was a lot of confidence in his face and on the sideline. Going into halftime, down 17-14, you got the fumble, you turn it into points immediately, and you go into the locker room, and he was like, we got to get a 3-and-out coming out of the locker room. And he was absolutely right. Penn State needed to stop the bleeding. And again, like, I don't know how many defenses in the country are going to be able to stop that Ohio State passing attack. It's incredible to watch them when they're in rhythm. The one thing our buddy Landon Tengwall was good enough to point out on social media is that Penn State fans will not likely have to see Julian Sayin ever again, because Penn State, I think, doesn't play Ohio State until 2028. So you have a little bit of a reprieve from the Buckeyes. However, next week it's Penn State hosting Fernando Mendoza, quarterback for the Indiana Hoosiers, who is arguably one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the country, and the other 2 would be Ty Simpson from Alabama and Julian Sayin from Ohio State. So this is just rough, man. And I mean, someone who's been there as a letterman, I'm not to this degree, but this is 5 straight losses for Penn State football. You have yet to win a Big Ten game this season. And looking at the schedule, might that come on November 15th at Michigan State? Like, it's, you can't take anything for granted at this point in time, but I continue to be stunned by how this season has played out. I'm not stunned by the result today, but at the same time, it's just it's disheartening. But what's been your observation now to see us at this point in this season?
Yeah, it's very tough, right? Because obviously you have, going into the season, all these playoff aspirations and big dreams and things like that. And, that kind of washed away a couple losses into the season. So now you kind of got that period of, okay, we're not playing for a national championship, playing for a bowl game. But at some point it has to kind of switch to, now we just playing for pride. And just being on different teams with different guys, there's always a pride about, like, man, I'm going out there and I'm balling. So yes, maybe we're not going right. Maybe we're not going to the playoffs, right? But it's still like every time I go out here, it's a new belief, and then like I'm winning my matchups today. We gonna look good, and then the rest will be the rest. But I feel like it should be one of those things now where it kicks in. Where it's just about pride, like whether it should be Penn State pride. Obviously, today's a little different with transfer portal and stuff. So I don't think people have as deep loyalty to certain schools. However, there's still football, and you're still a football player, and you're at this high level. So there's got to be some pride about, hey man, I don't care what the record is. We coming out here today and we playing some football.
There's a lot of players whose evaluations, I think, last year going into this year, you projected that they were maybe going to perform at a higher level. And there's some guys who are looking at regression, and it's unfortunate, but it's not a lack of effort. It's not a lack of toughness. I'll say that. It seemed like that against against Iowa, and it seemed like against Ohio State that, yes, Terry Smith has gotten these guys to play hard and to buy in and play with pride. And you didn't see them quit in this type of game. I'll say that, despite the score, and obviously Ohio State able to salt things away at the end. But tough outing once again for a Penn State football team that's now sitting at 3-5, winless within the Big Ten. Ohio State remains undefeated. They moved to 8-0, still the number one team in the country. Next week, Penn State is going to host Indiana at Beaver Stadium. So another tough test, because that is currently the number 2 team in college football. So we're going to have a full preview of Penn State versus Indiana in a couple of days here on State of State, Penn State Football Show. He is Deon Butler. I'm Tom Hannafin. Thank you so much for joining us live here on YouTube, and we'll see you for our preview of the Nittany Lions against the Hoosiers coming up, presented by FanDuel.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month. You can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by FanDuel.